and everything. I attached it in the Google Doc. I didn't think about a paper copy of this coming out, so it's not all in that column. But generally speaking, that's their policy. Anecdotally, both Chris and Cal have shared that it's been going well. That's their policy. And they were happy to give more details and more information. But I said I was going to come to this meeting first, and if we need more specific information, or if we want to get specific data, they were more than happy to provide it. We didn't get that far. They're both very accommodating and great. I have two spies who attend Marina Cook schools. One's 18 and one's 12. And I was able to get more information from the 12-year-old than the 18-year-old. But from a student perspective, because I want to know that information, right? Like, so we know what the policy is. Does it actually get implemented? My daughter in grade 7 shared that from what she saw, generally speaking, at the middle school, the policy was actually being widely enforced and it was actually being widely followed. There was the occasional kid who's got the phone behind the laptop screen, but there really aren't any students at that level who are blatantly getting the phone out, blatantly ignoring the policy. I asked what the consequence would be if they did, so they get sent to the office. That the teachers are following the policy, not overlooking it. Generally, it seems to be working pretty well at that level. She said occasionally a teacher might let a kid get their phone out to, it's like, hey, can I just update my parents because the game changed or whatever. Generally speaking, it's being followed. So that was a good report, and I know we can get more information if we want it.
Thank you.
Sure.
And in looking at this, I also didn't copy policy stuff. I think we all secured policy and family letters. I just didn't, that wasn't really today's meeting, so we didn't draw it out, but when we're ready for that, we certainly have access to it from different school systems.
I will definitely talk to the 18-year-old because I'm really curious about how it's being implemented and followed at the high school level. I imagine it would be potentially different.
May I ask a follow-up? So Jared, you said that administrators said it's going well. Did they define and kind of elaborate on that? What does it mean it's going well?
They didn't elaborate yet. I know they would be happy to. I was able to get in contact with them kind of late in the week, and it was kind of a cold email that I got a response to, which I was really appreciative of. You know, the fact that these two gentlemen took the time on Friday, honestly, if I'm being frank, to respond, say, here's what we got, and here's it's going good. And if you want to follow up with a phone call or a text or anything, I'm happy to talk more. And I just didn't go there going into today, but I will get an answer to that question. Like, I'd like that information too.
Yeah, does it mean a decline in discipline?
Yeah.
Are teachers reporting that students are more engaged in the classroom and less distracted?
Really great. That'll be great follow-up information. And I'll work on that. Thank you.
Like their definition. I mean, it covers everything, right? Earbuds, everything right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never think of that because you can do everything wirelessly now.
Sarah, do you want to share Lewiston and Coney, what you could secure from them?
Yeah, so I reached out to Superintendent Langless in Lewiston, and I used to work there, so I have a good relationship with Jake. And he was very open to it. They have considered going to a ban, but they have not taken those steps yet. I think they're doing some similar layers that we're doing right now. So their policy is pretty much identical to ours. 8th grade and under, no cell phones at all. They should be away and out of sight and off at all times. And then during high school, students are allowed to have them during non-instructional times, lunch, hallways, advisory, like dismissal time. So there wasn't a lot there that I kind of gleaned because they just haven't taken that step yet. I reached out and spoke to Kim Lipscomb, who's the principal over at Coney Middle School and High School. They're combined, as you know, and they have gone into a ban. They started that process. They didn't do a lot of surveys, but they did a lot of committee work inside. They shared with me some letters they shared with parents about it. They have a really nice Q&A that they use with their staff and also put out publicly for their parents that I think answered some of those what if this happens and what if this happens? That was a great resource to kind of flip through and gave me some insight. Students there, and that is middle school and high school, they are allowed to have their phones basically during breakfast and they're allowed to have them during lunch. That way there's a time for them to have them. What I did really like about some of their policies in that was that they really identify the boundaries about having them out, about not being able to take pictures or videos. So they actually had some really neat specifics in there, like, fine, we're gonna allow you to have it here because you don't at other times. Check that text from mom about soccer or whatever it is. But this is it, and these are the boundaries, and if you break those, they have very clear outline steps of what happens first and second and third, which is actually pretty similar to us. Like the first is like a warning, and the second is it might be taken for the end of that period, you know, and so forth. They have, some of their classrooms are using pouches more at the high school level, and some of them are not. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. At the middle school level, they're using some pouches to lock them down, and at the high school, they're not. So I think it's a little different. They said the middle school kids were very easy. They kind of came in. Similar here, we see a lot of our sixth graders often don't get phones usually until they're closer to seventh grade. So the kids have kind of just been rolling in like, all right, that's not too far off from what our policy was before. They've been getting a lot of pushback from the high school students, especially, but that's because it's only 2 years in its making, and so it's still kind of rolling upward. So they said this year's better than it was the first year, and they're expecting as those middle school students shift upwards that they'll see the buy-in to it come more and more.
Did they say, if the students are not buying in, did they explain to you what that looks like? What does that mean?
Yeah, it sounded very similar. I asked the same thing, like, what does that look like? And they said the same thing. They're doing the sneaky behind the screens. They have them in bathrooms, you know, and they continue to find it. Same, I think, probably is here, a lot of this other students who are enforcing it are saying, hey, so-and-so is in the bathroom, and they do the addressing, and they sit down, they go over the policies, they make them sign them, make parents sign them at the beginning of the year. So that seems to help, and they just kind of continue, but I don't think it's blatantly disrespectful. I think it's just the sneaky trying to get away with it when no one's looking sorts of layers.
So has there been a reduction in social media interactions that are occurring at school? Are staff seeing students being primarily more respectful of the policy, abiding by the policy?
Yes.
And distractions, are the distractions?
Yeah, the distractions are definitely down. They said parents have actually been pretty supportive as a whole. I didn't ask about the social media aspect. I can do a follow-up on that with her. One of the things that I thought was interesting that's in here you'll see is that students themselves actually reported having more meaningful and engaging conversations with each other, not just in class, but outside of class, that they were actually being forced to connect more. And without that distraction, they were finding that they were more interested in what was going on in school. So I did think it was interesting that that was a piece that students themselves were reporting. They've done some sort of mini surveys with the students throughout the process to get feedback from them. So that came from that.
Thanks, sir. I attended RSU, Katie Joseph is the director of curriculum in RSU1, which is sort of the Bath area. And she used to be the director of curriculum here. And she actually presented to the Maine Curriculum Leaders Association recently, virtually. And so I was able to go back in and rewatch the recording and get access to her materials. And so that's where my notes came from. This is their first year of implementation. They have a full ban of phones and watches during the school day. So, and they have the hours defined. Let's say it's 8 to 3 or 7:30 to 2:30 or something like that. But as soon as so at our high school, we end at 1:55, middle school ends at 2. At that point, they can have them out. Say they stay after school. They can have them out, and they use Yonder pouches. So those are like magnetically sealed pouches. The students put their devices in, and then as they enter the building, they magnetize their pouch. And then as they leave the building or near exits, they can demagnetize at the end of the day. So that's their management system around it. So phone and watch free. They can have the earbuds. I would say it wrong. The only exception they have is if a student has a medical situation where the app on their phone is required for them to monitor, and it's only for diabetes or a heart condition. So like anxiety doesn't count. And they did actually consider anxiety as one of the 504 accommodations mostly. But when they went through all kinds of follow-up, they decided not to include it. And it hasn't been a problem for them. Their overall outcome is they wish they did this sooner. They ended up having a lot more support than they expected, and a lot more relief for teachers and administrators. Students have increased their interpersonal skills and development, and when after school, when the phones are allowed and kids are hanging out, they're often actually not accessing them unless they're getting a ride home or something. So they've been really surprised by that. In the first few weeks, they did have lots of burner phones. So certain kids would have 5 burner phones. It's stashed in all kinds of different places, but they have a very clear and distinct policy, and they just followed their policy straight for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden that's like pretty much done. They have very few issues. They did have some students on their district committee, much like ours. And of the 2 students on their district committee, one was for the cell phone ban and one was entirely against it, consistently all the way through. And they did run surveys. Their staff and their family surveys came back very much alike, and their student surveys came back as the opposite. So the students were not in favor of the cell phone ban, and yet they still implemented it. And the feedback now, so this presentation was in November. The feedback as of November was that it was fine. Like it was not as big a deal as the students at first had said it would be. They did a lot of reading and made available before surveys were accessed, or while sending out surveys, they provided links. And so those are sort of in here, although I didn't print them all off, but I can get them to you. They gave if you go to the last page on this packet, this is RSU1 survey information. So they had steps. So they had a short brochure, a quick video, and a series of articles, a research article, another article, or another type of short video on teenage smartphone addiction, to educate people if they wanted to know more before they took the survey. Then their law enforcement offices had written letters in support of a ban and why, and they specifically addressed the challenges when phones are accessible during an emergency and crisis situation, and the impact it has on law enforcement in responding efficiently and accurately. And more research they added in. They did embed, just so you know, there's a couple things in here about school start times being later. They were exploring later school start times at the same time they were exploring cell phone use. And so every so often you'll see here something here. They did not start school later. They did have a cell phone and smartwatch ban. And so then they had surveys. You have copies of surveys in here that we can look at later. And then their overall result, I don't know if I wrote it in here, so I thought I'd better check. Was that they needed to have a very clear policy. They call it the ladder of consequences. It's consistent from building to building and level to level with a few language tweaks for certain age groups. And I have access to that. They did also create an FAQ like Coney did. They have family letters that are accessible for us to look at too. Staff are allowed to have phones and watches, but should only be using them when they have no students in their room. When they are teaching, they should not be touched unless they need it to project something for instructional purpose, at which point they are supposed to explicitly say to students, on my phone, I have this something I prepared for a lesson and I'm projecting it to the screen, and that's the only reason I'm pulling my phone out. Like they're supposed to be, and students can actually tell administration on staff if they're using their phones when they're not supposed to, and they have a couple times. And your questions. They, social media use is not a problem because they ban it. So they go in and they block it on all their network sites. So if they're not having access to their phones and their smartwatches during the school day, they can't get them on their school laptops. So that's the social media piece during the school day. Hallway traffic is much better. Vaping is down. The number of follow through that admin has to do on social media inquiries that are problematic, bullying, cyberbullying, sexting, all those sorts of things that they have to follow up on is down significantly as a result of phones not being accessed during the day. Vaping because kids aren't texting each other and meet up in the bathrooms to take care of business. So the admin feels like they actually have their life back, that they can actually have productive conversations with students, work on more typical behavior response systems, and actually get to become instructional leaders again. So that's the admin perspective. The teachers say that they have significantly reduced distractions and they're able to have students converse more effectively. And families, they've actually gotten a lot of letters from families thanking them. Not at first, but after the first month, they were surprised and they got a lot of positive feedback from families. There was a cost. They chose to purchase the Yonder pouches. It's very expensive. They used those ESSER, American Rescue Plan funds. And then their annual renewal cost just for like replacing the pouches that broke and stuff is manageable in their budget. And I've indicated that in the chart.
Do you have any idea how large their district is?
Yeah, 1,700 students.
Thank you.
So ours was 1,900, but it's a little, it's around there. So it's about the similar size.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments?
This is great. Thank you for doing the legwork. What it makes me think is this may probably not be a popular opinion, but like, it's pretty clear. The research is clear, like, should we spend a whole lot of time thinking of and talking about and surveying people and all that sort of thing? Maybe it's important if like Coney didn't do that, somebody didn't survey.
They didn't
And it
survey, they had a
seems like-
committee though.
Yeah, they had a committee, but they didn't do a survey
Do
specific.
we think that a survey, they're the ones who had more struggle, right?
Only with the high school students pushed back, but yeah.
Do we need to spend a bunch of time doing work when we already know the answer?
Yeah, and I'm curious if teachers, if I put my parent hat on, teacher, I'll ask you maybe, and Jared, is it better when you have the autonomy to decide your classroom, or is it better if you have a policy that you can point at and say, we just do this because, you know?
For us, I've really appreciated the policy because we have lower elementary level students who are coming in with smartwatches already
Mhm.
and they're using them in the bathroom. And they're taking pictures on them even in the bathroom.
Oh,
And
gosh.
so it's a violation of everyone's privacy and you don't think of it at that low. But they're making calls and answering their parents' calls in the middle of the school day in
Oh,
class. I mean, it's
Wow, okay.
yeah, so I think even at a lower level, it's beneficial to be able to say, listen, mom, I know you're worried about her, but she's here and the policy says it has to be locked in her backpack. So there can't really be any pushback. So I appreciate the policy.
And for
Okay.
everyone's information, you teach grade 2.
I teach second grade, yes.
Yeah, so
And
elementary.
we had a cell phone issue in kindergarten when I was subbing as a principal one day.
So I think ideally, I would love to not have to do all the work since the research is pretty clear. My only issue is that I think it would help to do the surveys in the high school for a smoother transition because a lot of them have things that they want to say and input to give. And if we just give them like a place to do it, I think it'll help with that initial pushback that a lot of the schools experienced. Also, if we're worried about spending money on those pouches, could we consider doing like those calculator pouches? Because that's what my calc teacher did last year, or pre-calc teacher did last year, was the pouches that are meant for your calculator, we just put our phones in at the beginning of class, and then when we left, we got them out. So that might just be a little bit more cost effective, if that's it.
What about others? What do you think?
I think it would be important to, I've gone back and forth about the survey too. Because the idea behind a survey is if you don't really want to know, don't ask the question. If you're not going to use the data, don't ask the questions, right? And I think it's important for a committee to understand where the majority of people stand on something, because it helps inform, like, if we're really set, even so, on having a ban, we can at least gauge either how hard is it going to be, or where is the entry point that's acceptable to different parties? Like, is it, do we want to invest in something that's a real lockdown, or do we want to have like a middle ground, or do we, you know, that every class period you have a procedure, or I think sometimes, and of course, I always think students have opinions that it's important to hear from them, because I think they are often more willing to meet you in the middle and have some ideas behind it that we might not have thought about. And it's important to hear those out.
I
So
also wearing a
that's-
hat of policy,
Yeah.
right? And the need to develop a policy.
Right.
Should we move forward, receiving information and feedback from all of our stakeholders could really help us develop a policy that is responsive to what we hear from our students and our parents.
I think one of the surveys in here, so these are not all like main surveys. This colorful pie chart one is from RSU one, and it's set up so like we wouldn't know who said what, right? Except for groups, if it's a family or a student or staff. And then there's a few other surveys from like totally different places. And the reason for that is to see that they set them up really differently. You know, one is just a Likert scale of belief systems, so you can start figuring out where people really land on this. One's a little bit older, from 2019, so it's really trying to understand where people have parameters, and if this is really to prevent cyberbullying, or if it's really to prevent distractions and that kind of thing. And then there's one that actually helped them, the last one from Albany, is help them inform their really inform their policies, just policy related. So it was a much broader committee like this, and it wasn't, they weren't sure if they were gonna take it to the next level. And so there's similar questions across all of them. But the framing of the questions really depends on what you're trying to get out of it.
I was gonna kind of capture, I'm sorry.
No,
So I was gonna kind of capture what Sage said and what Pat said as well, and to Angela's point, all of that kind of goes to what I was gonna say, which is, I think there is value in a survey, because not only students, but parents are going, you know, if you want a policy that's going to live and last and survive, it is very important to make sure that the students do have a place where they can offer their input, particularly at the 9-12 level, and I think the parents as well. But it is about the questions that you choose to ask, because I think we understand pretty clear what the research says about the effects of the phones, but the questions we can ask are things like, what aspects of the cell phone policy are most important to you? Or what are your concerns? Like, what are the things that are most important to you when it comes to technology access? How have you been affected by, how is having access to your phone in school up until now affected you personally? Like, have you been bullied? Have you been more distracted? You can ask all those questions, like, how have you been affected? And what do you want in a policy? And that almost presupposes there's going to be some kind of policy, but it's giving people input on what the policy is going to look like, not whether or not they support phones in schools, if that's a settled issue. You know, and I think it's that 1-2 combination of, here's and this is what it looks like Bath did, here's the data that we found, this is what we know the effects of phones are in school, and knowing that, what do you want to see in a cell phone policy, or what are your concerns about cell phone access? So we get that input, but having developing any good policy is like, it's not just the outcome, but it's the process itself. Where like people feel like they were part of that process. And sometimes it takes longer, but you do have to do that walk. Because you don't just want a policy that goes into place, in September 2025. You want a policy that is enforceable and that creates the positive outcome in the end, not just the, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Trailing
Well,
off here, but.
And we don't wanna surprise people, not everyone's tuned into this issue. So sometimes, like I think the way Bath did it, where they put, here's a survey we want, but if you wanna be informed before you go to the survey, here's all these, here's the brief, at the 10-second, the 30-second, 3-minute, and the 30-minute way to inform yourself before you take the survey, which means we are paying attention to this, and here's an opportunity for you to be aware that this is something going on.
And
It's-
here are all the times over the last 6 to 9 months that we've invited you to be part of the process and given you more information about what was going on, so that, because not everybody is gonna be paying attention initially, but creating opportunities to come in. And I think going back to Alyssa's question, at the high school level, having a universal policy is really important. I think in some ways, teachers do want autonomy on a lot of things, but something like this, it's critical that it's the same policy for everybody, because that gives teachers support. They can say, look, we're all doing the same thing. And I think it's important that for this to work, the two things I'm seeing are the same policy and a strict level of enforcement. There's that there's gonna be that extinction behavior at the beginning, and I feel like there's some pretty significant consequences for the kids that weren't following the policy. And that's when you saw it, after like a month, started to go away, because kids got the message. Like, same policy for everybody, I think.
And I think you really articulated that well. I agree. I think getting information even from the middle school kids is important. I know we've been doing a lot of work this year to make sure that their voices are heard and then we're responsive to their voices. Our MIAS data shows us that our kiddos don't feel that way. And so I think it's important to make sure that we get people's voices. I wanted to share one more piece of data that I collected. Last week, my staff kept a tally of how many times they had to address cell phones. Now, keep in mind that we had a virtual day and then we had a 2-hour delay and it was a little, and the crud is going through, but in the end on Friday, they kept it from Monday to Friday. I heard from 48 staff who gave me data that they collected, and we had 256 incidents that they addressed in 4 days, basically, right? Including a 2-hour delay on one of those. And that's 256 redirections, put your phone away. That wasn't even like they had to confiscate. That was literally just, I had to address something about putting your phone away.
Like 50% of your population, pretty much.
Basically, roughly about half the school had to be spoken to at some point. And again, that's not all the staff. We had some absences and things, but that's 4 days that we had 256 instances in 1 week. Just to give some feedback and perspective on what's really happening at that secondary middle school level.
So based on everyone's feedback, I'm sensing that consensus is that we move forward with some surveys. Okay.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we can begin thinking about those surveys and thinking about some timeframes. Staff, parents, students, we need to think about whether, if we're doing students, is it the same survey to middle school as to high school? Is it the same questions but worded differently? So we need to think about it from that term. I really like what RSU one did and would like for us to think about it with our own survey, and that is to provide all of these little brochures, videos up front as a way of providing families with some educational materials if they're interested, right, in learning more about the impacts of cell phone usage on the students.
And we can use our MIAS data, right, as some
Yeah,
criteria to share. Yep,
Yeah, absolutely.
yep. I know at the high school we have our champions here that create surveys. Sarah, do you have, you don't really do like student service or folks that,
We have an SSO organization, I guess that
I'm
was
just
redundant
thinking, would
because
it make
student service
sense to have
organization is already
it
built
come
into the
from
acronym.
within too, or do you think it's not quite?
I'm not sure that our students are quite ready for the
Okay,
surveys.
that's fine.
Usually, like if we would need to do something, usually like we would do it at the administration or with our team leaders group, and then we distribute out
Got it.
to the kiddos.
Or I'm just thinking even if the high school kids wanted to share it and see if they wanted.
But if surveys are going out, should that come, I hear you asking, should
Yeah.
that come from students or should it come from the entire committee?
Right,
My initial reaction is it comes from the entire committee, right? A little bit more
yeah,
legitimacy
I
to
agree.
that.
Yep,
I don't put pressure on you two either.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
But I also wanna say, like, the last time we met, Sage and Carol talked about having some sort of student panel with diverse perspectives from the students so that, and I don't think we should do one over the other. I wonder if there's time, if we can afford both formats, because you get more from a discussion, but you won't get the broadest group,
that's right.
right? You only,
Yeah.
you'll get a broader response rate and a gut reaction for sure from a survey, especially if you'll be able to, if the principal will be able to have it conducted during advisory period, like you've started doing for your own surveys. So I don't know, I'm not saying we have to do it, I'm just remembering that you both raised it and as an opportunity, and I just am curious.
So we just met, right? We always meet once a month as student reps. And this was a topic that we discussed. And I think where we landed is that we'll start with the survey, and maybe one of the questions on the survey is whether they would be interested and willing to participate in a forum, so that we could learn more from them. That would give them the opportunity to identify who they are, since surveys are typically anonymous, right? So that's kind of where we fell. Do you want to talk a little bit more, either of you, about that? But that you both still feel very strongly
Yeah.
that there should be a forum.
I think it would be very helpful. But basically with the whole surveys being anonymous, it would be anonymous up until the very end, where like then it would be yes or no, are you interested in coming to this? And then if you don't mind, please write your name here or your email here so that we can contact you and further. And we thought we could follow up with that contact by like giving them a couple of resources to kind of make sure that they aren't just completely blind going into it, which we thought would be nice.
And we also thought that we would hold like the student forum like during the school day, like maybe in the little theater in the gym. So transportation isn't a barrier and they won't have to miss the bus or anything for it. So it's just more accessible. Then we would once you know who's interested, we would ask them like what period works best for you. Then we would try to go about like getting them excused from that period if some of them don't have the study hall.
And if we get like a larger group, we could also expand that into multiple forums instead of just one to get maximum participation.
Yeah, then we also talked about maybe doing a parent one or like a staff or teacher one. So we get like more in-depth responses from different groups and not just the students. But I don't.
And I, again, ask the question, what is the format of a forum?
Right.
Is it simply for people to ask questions, or is it also the purpose educational? Do you bring individuals to the forum who can speak to the research, who can provide that information? And then that leads into questions about proposed changes. Does that make
It
sense?
makes me think about a few years ago, how many years now, but we did do sort of a community meeting up at the one part of the gym when it had to do with the late start committee.
I remember.
And it was facilitated in such a way that it was both a little bit informational, making sure we all kind of had some baseline information. And then moved into small groups for discussion and then drawing out kind of some prompts that then resulted in some kind of voting. Which, and we were very clear, it wasn't like your vote is going to make the decision, but it was like pieces, just like the survey, there's pieces that we want more information on. And now that you've had the information, you've talked with others from diverse perspectives, and now where do you land on it? So it kind of both informed and gave us more input. So it's almost like a listening session of each other, not just listening to a presenter share something and then quietly process it and have an opinion at the end of the day. And it also follows that strategic plan where it's about a conversation. It's really like, do we have time for conversation? I think you and Sarah have something to say.
So like, do people just kind of like go around the room and kind of listen to what people are saying? Is that how like you would gather the information?
So we put them, it's similar. So usually there's like some sort of common orientation at the beginning and maybe a quick little video clip or something. And then we moved them into small groups and either had a facilitator at each small group that just had prompts. So you're not taking a stance, you're just asking some questions and the group is discussing them.
Okay.
And then at the end, they sort of like, what's our summary from this? And then they go sticky dot it or against charts, or they leave some notes somewhere.
Okay.
So that you can, and that way it's actually like a real conversation and not just something someone could have answered in a survey.
Yeah, I
Do
like
you like that idea? Because you could do that with students too.
I feel like that would be a lot. I feel like we'd get more students signing up for that too, because a lot of us don't like the public speaking.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, or like sitting up on the stage and trying to answer questions in
Yeah.
front of everyone.
I had to speak in front of the sophomore class at a meeting, and it was very like daunting. So I don't know if like many people would want to do that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's important to take note of.
I just had this thought that it would be interesting if we could grab kiddos from RSU1 who've been through this process to come to that, do you know what I mean? To maybe give some of their firsthand experience. You know what I mean? Again, there's a lot of layers to that, but it might be interesting and beneficial to our students to hear from other students.
Yeah.
You know, like I always think it's nice to hear from kids who've been through that, so that might just be an interesting way to help lean, and maybe they sit at the discussions, well, the smaller ones, and or if questions come up, they can help answer what it looks like for them, and really it's not, you know, I hated it at first, but it really now, you know, this is what we're discovering, and maybe just some real life testimony might be good for people to hear.
Okay.
Random thought.
Someone who doesn't like it too.
Yeah, that too, right? I hate it, this is why, yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
Huh, interesting. I like that idea. I'm just kind of thinking about.
Logistics, right? Like I said, logistics,
how
there's
can we make that
logistics,
happen?
but
Are students from another school district going to want to give their time to
Right.
come here to discuss
If you
it?
give them community service hours.
Exactly.
well, that was
And
what
some
the other thought I
leadership.
had was.
They
is
were on
that,
a forum.
Right, I like
Yeah.
that idea.
But I just think that could be really powerful.
It does, by having surveys and forums, it does potentially extend the amount of time. But it could also mean more people have touch points to this and realize this is a real conversation that's happening, that's going to lead to a policy. Which is yet to be determined. And there is something to be said about touching more people. That's a terrible way of saying, reaching out to more people and having them have an opportunity to process.
Right.
Because at board meetings, when policies passed, it is not a discussion, right? It's their discussion. Because it's a meeting in the public, not of the public. And so the more that we authentically engage people ahead of time, the outcome comes forward, it might be easier for everyone.
Education on policy is always a good thing to do. Policy process. Yeah.
It reduces objections,
Yeah.
you know, at the board when there's a policy that's supposed to be passed. reducing the opportunity for people to say, we didn't have any chance to ask questions, we didn't have any opportunities to share our input. That's powerful. We had several meetings on this, and anyone who wanted to come and ask questions was invited, and all of our stakeholder groups.
Plus, we've talked like RSU1 did have their law enforcement as part of this process, and right now we don't, and like maybe that's something we wanna think about. Cause I'm curious about that, and then maybe there's other avenues we haven't thought about.
Yeah. Yeah, when I look at the makeup of their committee, I don't know what all of these acronyms stand for, DOS, what is DOS?
I have to ask
Yeah,
her.
see, I don't know. So,
Oh, yeah,
what is it?
Dean of Students, she did say something about Dean of Students, you're right, good catch. I was one, so.
All right.
Well, and it's not only policy, it could be things that go into effect from the IT side too. So
Yeah,
kind of,
sure.
Right.
Terry and the group involved there
Which is
too.
nice what it
Yeah,
says here, right?
exactly. Okay, and I like the idea of people signing things, just like they do the computer use. It's like we could add some information in there or have its own or whatever.
We sign our student
right.
handbook, students and
Exactly.
parents every year, and our
Yep.
staff sign their handbook every year. I mean, it's just part of what we do.
Yep.
So we know people have access.
Earlier that social media sites aren't currently blocked?
No,
I
our
don't
social
know.
media sites are blocked
Okay.
in
Yeah,
past.
I'm not in the school, so I don't answer to that, I only answer to what RSU said they did, and
Yeah.
other people in the room know better.
Yes, they are definitely blocked on our devices.
When they're on our
Yeah.
system, so, right, and so if they're using a cell phone and they're using cell data, they may be on social media.
That would consider, with blocking social media, would be to block VPN websites as well, because that's
Not a
another
girl,
way to get
Sage.
around
You got
it.
it. You got it.
That,
You can't.
I don't know.
that's a Terry question,
Yeah.
sometimes there are ideas that, yeah, look at his face. That seems so obvious, but there are reasons why we can't do it.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
yeah.
usually it's a notify
know.
and dig
There's
in.
new ones all the time. Like,
Totally,
We
exactly.
have full-time staff who do this and they just.
Yep.
And if you know a number, the DOI, when you're at home and you bring it in on a piece of paper, you can just go to it. They're replicating all of the time. So
Yeah.
you can and should be blocking them, but it's.
Yeah, it's in the
Continuous.
constant, yeah. Or they get new names and yeah.
What would we do with I don't know if we already talked about this, but would people bring personal laptops to school? What would happen with that? We have a bunch of people who bring MacBooks to school instead of notebooks.
That's true.
If they're connecting to your network, it should still be blocked.
They could have data on it too, would would
But
we
if they,
ban-
so you know how when you connect, you get the splash screen here that you have to agree to our rules? If they click that, then they have to abide by our rules,
But if they
basically.
have like their own data on it though.
If they're
Again,
using their cell phone,
Yeah.
it's.
That's off.
They can do anything.
Yeah,
If they're using their cell data, they're.
Yeah, but like I'm saying, if we were to ban like personal technology, would personal laptops also fall under that?
depends how they're connecting, yeah.
It's a good question, and then you also end up with students with the means to do that and students without the means. to
That's
do
right,
that.
yeah.
Becomes a little bit classist.
That's interesting. I didn't realize there were that many
But
doing
It's a
that.
good
They can
It's more
only
prevalent in
access
the
our
senior
guest
and
network
junior
on
classes
personal
because people
devices.
start
Oh.
using their personal laptops for college and then
That
they
makes sense, yeah.
bring them. And also with people who take college classes in addition
Yeah,
to, because
Gotcha.
I have a friend that has one on B days, I think it is, one period here, and then she's taking 3 online courses, online AP courses. And so that's what she can do for,
Gotcha.
so.
All right, I wanna keep an eye on
That's
the
gonna be some fun.
time.
Yeah, that'll be
Um,
interesting.
I have a phone call coming in at 4:15, so I need to be done by 4:10 at the absolute latest so I can transition. So let's start talking about next steps, assigning roles and responsibilities to some of us and probably timelines. If we want to release surveys, I would assume that we want to get the surveys rolling out to families and to students in January, right? We need to have this done immediately following the holidays. So,
Immediately following the
well,
holidays?
shortly, sorry. Let me change that.
Panic
Shortly
ensues.
after the holidays, mid-January.
Martin Luther King Day.
How about mid-January?
Mid to late January. I've looked at your calendar and mine.
All right, mid to late, yeah. Yeah, we're pretty booked. But I would look
Still
back
design
and
them.
say, again, part of the reason for forming the committee is the realization that we can't do everything ourselves. You know, we really need some support, some help. So if we can all take some responsibility in this, it will just make the work go a little bit faster and easier, so. Okay, so we want to start with, what, student surveys?
Well, do we want all the surveys going out at around the same time? Because
Yes.
if you roll out one and then all of a sudden 2 weeks later you roll out the next, there's gonna be some questions about like,
Is this
oh, you're
different?
looking for a
Yeah.
different data set for a
Right.
purpose, right? Instead of just like, we
Yeah.
actually wanna hear from everyone.
Yeah, I completely agree. I guess I was throwing that out because who's gonna take some responsibility for helping to develop? But I agree that they should be rolled out at about the same time. And I also, I mean, there was just so many steps here that I'd like to see happen. You know, we need to have, identify who's gonna help take care of the student surveys, who's going to develop those. We need the staff survey, we need the parent survey, but again, I really like the idea of having that introduction with some articles, brochures, the quick video. So that also, we would need someone to maybe take some responsibility to try to pull that together. That is something I could work on, if someone else could address the surveys.
I'm happy to help out with surveys, yeah. Do we want like all like Google type surveys, like digital surveys?
Yeah.
Do you have Survey Monkey?
No, but we have Google Forms.
Free, you can use it, yeah, built in.
And it helps because then it's in the system. Doesn't matter.
Tag teaming with Frida to help be another set of eyes, if you wanna do it, and I can help.
Being anonymous, I don't know how much of a consideration
We
that
can,
is.
we can click it so it's not, doesn't collect data.
Yeah, doesn't
we have,
capture
like,
email or anything.
A lot of the community
Yep.
ones, we don't collect any of their emails or anything like that. We just, we get numbers.
Yeah, we did that with the health clinic one for the high school students too. So we didn't know who and who didn't exactly have insurance.
And if you can see that stuff, I would have no idea how, but Terry's never
Sure.
shown us, so our guess is
Well,
we can't.
I guess the concern is what if somebody in the comments does put in something that is reportable? Like, if you look at some of these surveys, they talk about like, if you put in that you're gonna harm yourself or somebody else, that removes, like, we will find that information kind of thing.
Except
So-
for, if it's, I don't know that we actually can if we don't click that button. Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be tough.
there's no way to get it if we
Well,
don't click the
with
button.
Survey Monkey, there is, that's
Oh.
Yeah, it captures all of it, that's right, you're right.
I would hope they could put that in cell phone survey.
Yeah,
but anytime.
they have lots
you
of
leave
means to do it in other ways.
Anytime you give,
Open access,
Open.
yeah, you got it, somebody will write something, yeah.
But I guess the question is, will we have open? Right, a lot of these surveys don't have open feedback.
It's just so.
And so the
library
question
or-
is, do
yeah.
we want open feedback? Because if we want it, we have to take the time to go through it, and it's a lot of work.
that's a lot.
Or maybe we say
we
the
use-
forum is where your open feedback comes,
We use the forum for that.
yeah.
As far as we would have to have an open response for students who wanted to put their email so we could contact them.
Or we
Right,
could
that's
just link
different.
to another one where they can
Yeah.
put their name in.
That's another option. So whatever.
You
we
can
think-
you can branch it too, so that if they say yes, it branches to a whole new section, and
Oh,
then it
okay.
just does,
Yep.
and then you can just put in like super short, so you can't get a long answer.
Data validated.
You're right, though, we want that, okay. Go ahead.
Should me and Sage start like trying to well, like talking to Ms. Arnold and trying to plan like what the form will like for the students. Should we have that ready for next meeting?
Like a proposal of sorts.
I don't think so. I mean, what do others think? I think that our priority has to be for the next meeting, knowing that we have the holidays, is the survey.
Yeah.
So let's work on the survey
But
and
is that
then,
what you were saying? Oh, no, you're talking about the form.
and then next meeting, let's talk about the forum.
Okay.
Because I like Angela's idea, and the approach that we used before. So if we want to use a similar approach with forums, I think it's just going to need to be a larger conversation here.
But then what if I come with a template for what how we sort of organize it? And then you two could contribute and refine it between that and the next session. So that you still have some broad, like deep student input on that. But we have a format that we're all comfortable with and we've agreed to as a team.
Yeah.
Okay. So mine's done.
So-
And when we did that, sorry to belabor that for one more second, you hired someone to do it as a
Yeah.
third party,
Right.
an objective. If we don't have that, I don't know if we want to do that again or what you
We
think
can
is
talk
best.
about it.
Yeah.
As an option, yeah, I
Yeah.
had Grade Schools Partnership. come in
Yeah.
and- Or, no, I had an independent contractor, she
Independent.
wasn't back with them yet.
Right, exactly. I mean, I say that too, because I do those things all the time, but I don't need to be out there unless I'm needed that way.
So, survey. What if Frida and Alyssa, you work on the staff survey. Sage, Kiara, Jared, and Sarah, you work on the student survey. Angela and Laura, what if you work on the parent survey? I will work on the research section. And then I wonder, should we create a Google Doc in which we share the questions that each group are thinking of, because we want our questions somewhat aligned, right? We can't have them completely independent. So if we can put them in a Google Doc, then we can kind of pick and choose,
Yeah.
right, which ones are appropriate. They don't have to be identical, of course, but
Yeah.
but close. Does that make sense?
I agree.
Yeah.
And we did get that article that someone emailed you and you shared with us. That was helpful too,
Yes.
just
Would a
research.
spreadsheet be a better place to put those questions? That way people can like vote on if they like the question or not.
Yeah, the
I'm-
format doesn't matter to me, but
Okay.
yeah.
I'm really good with spreadsheets.
Okay, so you'll create, fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank
because
you,
then we can
Sage.
designate where we've used it, right? You can use
Yeah.
your columns
Yeah,
to say all
it's-
three, just one.
Yeah.
I love it. Yep. You know, I
Thank you,
love my
Sage.
data, Sage. Good job.
I also love my data,
Yeah.
so.
I love that someone else wants to do it.
Yeah. Okay, what else?
So I will bring a template concept for the forum that you can all then respond to, adjust all that for the next meeting, so then we can start setting dates and invitation strategies. We have Sage starting the Google Sheet for us, or a spreadsheet. And then from there, the teams will break out and add the questions in the way you suggest. And when's our next meeting?
That is what we have to decide next.
February.
Our next meeting is actually January 13th.
I
We
was
have
gonna
it on the
say,
calendar.
We already have it on the
do,
calendar.
right? Yeah,
Should we, if we have
it's a
not,
Monday, yeah.
oh, we've already booked the second Monday of every month,
Oh, okay, I just,
so we're
so
good.
many meetings. I
Yeah.
forget.
So the meeting on the 13th, we can refine our surveys. And we can launch them like the week of the 20th.
That sounds great.
And I was
Okay.
gonna say for folks that can't be here, if they wanna participate, they could reach out and we could push them to one of the groups so they could help. So that we always could use more help.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We do have 3 members
Okay, yeah,
absent.
yeah,
And at some point, I may reach out to Kennebec Sheriff, Gardner PD, and the State Police. We have so many
Totally.
parents who are troopers, and see if we could
Yep.
have some police involvement. And I love the idea that RSU1 had letters that were sent from law enforcement to families, really talking about the impact of students using cell phones during an emergency. So
yeah,
something we
That
may
is a
wanna think
real
about as
thing.
well. It
Yeah,
really, it is a
totally.
real thing.
yep,
Okay. Are we good?
excellent.
All right, awesome. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. have a happy holiday. Hope you all have very relaxing, enjoyable holiday with your families.
I'll see you at 5 or?
I will see you at 5.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah. You know why?
Yeah.